In the middle of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, something extraordinary is happening inside your brain. You pick up your phone to check one notification. 17 minutes later, you surface, dazed, slightly hollow, unable to remember what you originally opened it for. You didn't choose to spend those 17 minutes. You didn't decide to scroll through arguments between strangers, watch 3 videos you'll forget by tomorrow, and consume opinions about people you've never met. It just happened. And here's what nobody is telling you. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't weakness. That wasn't a lack of discipline. That was the result of billion-dollar engineering. Systems designed by the sharpest minds on Earth, optimized by artificial intelligence running millions of experiments every single day, all pointed at one target, your attention. Picture this. Despite living in the most distracted era in human history, despite carrying supercomputers in your pocket that never stop demanding your gaze, you can move through your day with unshakable clarity. You can sit with a single thought long enough to turn it into something real. You can choose where your mind goes, rather than being dragged there by invisible forces you never agreed to follow. This isn't a fantasy. This is what the ancient Stoics called the most fundamental human freedom, the sovereignty of your own mind. And it has never been more urgently needed than right now. Today we are diving into the intersection of one of humanity's oldest philosophies and one of its newest threats. We are exploring how to protect the most valuable thing you own in the age of artificial intelligence, your attention. Not with rigid productivity hacks or digital fasting trends, but with something far more powerful. Timeless principles that were forged long before algorithms existed, and yet speak directly to the war being waged inside your mind every single day. Stay with me as we journey through these principles, because by the end of this, you won't just understand what is happening to your focus. You will have the tools, the mindset, and the ancient wisdom to take it back completely. If you find value in what we explore here, the simplest thing you can do is hit subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it ensures this kind of depth finds its way back to you. Don't skip ahead. Every section builds on the last, and what comes later will reframe everything you think you know about your own mind. Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and died one of the most influential thinkers in history, said something that feels almost prophetic when you hear it today. Man is disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. He could not have known about smartphones. He could not have known about machine learning, recommendation engines, or the dopamine feedback loops engineered into every scroll. But he understood something about the human mind that Silicon Valley has spent trillions of dollars learning how to exploit. Your attention is not stolen from you. It is surrendered one micro decision at a time, and that changes everything. Principle 1. Understand what is truly yours. Let us begin at the very foundation of Stoic philosophy, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus opens his famous Enchiridion with words that have echoed through 20 centuries of human struggle. Some things are in our control and others not. In our control are our opinions, our judgments, our desires, our responses. Not in our control the weather, other people's behavior, the economy, the past. And in 2025, we must add something new to that second list: the algorithm. Here is what most people do not understand about modern AI systems. The recommendation engine running your social media feed is not neutral. It is not simply showing you things you might enjoy. It is an active intelligence, a non-human mind running hundreds of millions of A/B tests every single day, whose singular objective is to maximize your time on platform. Not your happiness, not your growth, not your relationships, your time on platform. This AI does not hate you. It does not love you either. It is utterly indifferent to what happens to your sleep, your relationships, your ability to concentrate, your sense of self-worth. It has one metric, and it is extraordinarily good at optimizing for it. Think of it this way. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and someone has placed thousands of small magnets in the ground, invisible, scattered everywhere. You think you are choosing your own path, but with every step you drift slightly toward the strongest pull, then the next, then the next. By the time you look up, you are miles from where you intended to go, and you have no idea how you got there. That is what navigating an AI-optimized digital environment feels like without Stoic awareness. The Stoic response is not panic. It is not to throw your phone into a river. It is to do what Epictetus taught first: draw the line clearly, name what is yours and what is not. The algorithm is not yours. The notifications are not yours. The trending topics are not yours. Your response to all of them, that is yours. Completely, irrevocably, powerfully yours. One practical way to begin reclaiming this is what modern psychologists call an attentional audit, and what the Stoics would simply call self-knowledge. For 3 days, every time you pick up your phone, Pause for 2 seconds and ask, did I choose this or was I pulled here? Do not judge the answer. Simply observe it. What you will discover will unsettle you at first, and then it will liberate you. Because once you see the magnet, it loses half its power immediately. Remember, you cannot fight an enemy you refuse to name. The first act of stoic resistance in the digital age is simply seeing the system clearly for what it is. Principle 2. Guard the gate of your mind. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and perhaps history's greatest stoic practitioner, wrote in his private journals, "Words never intended for public eyes. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote those words while managing the largest empire on earth, fighting a plague and leading armies across frozen rivers. He understood something that every person scrolling through a feed at 2 a.m. has forgotten. The mind is a gate, and you are its only gatekeeper. Here is what artificial intelligence has learned about the human gate that makes it so effective at bypassing your defenses. Your brain evolved to prioritize threat, novelty, and social information above everything else. These were survival mechanisms on the African savanna 200,000 years ago. See something move in the bushes, pay attention immediately. Hear angry voices in the tribe, stop everything. Notice who has higher status than you, monitor carefully. Every one of those ancient alarm systems is being triggered, deliberately and continuously, by AI-curated content. The outrage you feel scrolling through political content, that is your threat detection system being hijacked. The restless need to check whether your post got more likes, that is your social status monitor being exploited. The impossible to resist urge to watch one more video, that is your novelty-seeking circuit being fed synthetic stimulation at precisely the rate that prevents satisfaction but ensures continuation. This isn't conspiracy. This is documented, published, admitted by the engineers who built these systems. Former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris called it a race to the bottom of the brain stem. The features that win are the ones that reach the deepest, most primitive parts of your neural architecture, bypassing your rational mind entirely. The Stoics called that rational mind the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the part of you capable of reason, judgment, wisdom, and choice, the part that makes you genuinely human rather than simply reactive. And AI has learned to go around it. So how do you guard the gate? Marcus Aurelius practiced what we might call intentional friction. Before acting on any impulse, anger, desire, anxiety, he would pause and ask, is this impulse mine or has something external planted it in me? This single question, practiced daily, creates what neuroscientists now call metacognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking rather than simply being swept along by it. One practical technique is to design your environment before your impulses arrive. This means turning off all non-essential notifications, not silencing them, turning them off entirely. It means moving social media apps off your home screen, forcing yourself to actively seek them rather than stumbling into them reflexively. It means charging your phone outside your bedroom so that the first and last minutes of your day are not determined by an algorithm. These are not dramatic gestures. They are acts of stoic boundary setting, deliberately restructuring your environment to align with your values rather than the platform's objectives. This is about understanding your mind deeply enough to defend it. The Stoics didn't just philosophize about inner peace. They engineered their daily lives to protect it. In the age of AI, we must do the same with the same intention, the same precision, and the same uncompromising commitment. Remember, guarding your mind is not a passive state. It is an active daily practice. The gate does not guard itself. Principle 3. Desire only what is within your power. Here is a truth that the attention economy has weaponized against you so effectively that most people never see it happening. Comparison is the engine of digital manipulation. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who hankers after more." He wrote that 2,000 years ago, and yet he has perfectly described the psychological mechanism that makes social media so extraordinarily profitable. The moment you see someone else's highlight reel, their vacation, their body, their relationship, their success, a gap opens in your mind between where you are and where they appear to be. That gap creates desire. That desire creates continued engagement. That engagement is sold to advertisers. You are not the customer of these platforms. You are the product. Your dissatisfaction is the raw material. And artificial intelligence has become extraordinarily precise at calibrating exactly how much dissatisfaction to create. Not so much that you leave the platform in despair. Not so little that you stop craving. Just enough to keep you scrolling, comparing, consuming, perpetually reaching for a satisfaction that the system is specifically designed to prevent you from finding. The Stoic response to this is not to become indifferent to life or to stop having ambitions. It is something far more radical and far more powerful. It is to want differently. Epictetus taught that we suffer not because of what we lack, but because of what we believe we should have. Change the belief, and the suffering dissolves. In practical terms for the digital age, this means developing what we might call attentional intentionality, a clear conscious knowledge of what you actually want from your life, so that manufactured desire has nowhere to take root. Think of it this way. A tree with deep roots does not bend in every wind. A person with a clear sense of their own values does not drift toward every algorithmically generated craving. The Stoics spent significant time, daily, through journaling, through reflection, through conversation with mentors, clarifying exactly what they valued and why, not what they were told to value, not what their culture assumed they should want, what they, after careful rational examination, genuinely chose. That clarity is a shield. One practical approach is what we might call a desire inventory. Take 30 minutes, away from your phone, away from screens, and write down everything you currently want. Everything. Then ask of each item, is this something I chose after reflection, or something I absorbed from my environment? Is this desire pointing me toward my own values, or has it been planted in me by a system designed to profit from my restlessness? You do not have to abandon everything external, but you must know the difference between a fire you lit yourself and a fire someone else lit inside you for their own purposes. This is not pessimism. This is the deepest form of self-respect. The refusal to be a vessel for desires that were engineered by a machine to serve someone else's balance sheet. Remember, the Stoics did not teach poverty of ambition. They taught sovereignty of desire. Know what you want, know why you want it, and let nothing, no algorithm, no feed, no artificially curated peer pressure, determine that for you. Principle 4. Practice the premeditation of digital evils. Epictetus suggested that by envisioning potential difficulties along our path, we prepare ourselves to face them calmly and thoughtfully. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, and it is arguably the most immediately practical tool in the entire Stoic toolkit for surviving the attention economy. Here is how most people approach their digital day. They wake up, reach for the phone, and walk directly into one of the most sophisticated psychological manipulation environments ever constructed, with absolutely no preparation, no awareness, no plan, and no defense. It is the equivalent of walking into a casino, drunk, with no spending limit and no exit strategy, and then wondering why you lost everything. The Stoic approach is radically different. Before you open any digital platform, before you check email, before you open social media, before you begin your working day online, you spend a few minutes anticipating exactly what you are about to encounter. Not to create anxiety, but to build immunity. Ask yourself, what will this platform try to make me feel today? Outraged, envious, anxious, inferior? What specific emotional buttons does this environment typically push in me? What content tends to pull me into mindless consumption? What notifications tend to trigger reactive behavior that I later regret? Name them. Anticipate them. Decide in advance how you will respond. This practice creates what neuroscientists call implementation intentions, pre-made decisions that your brain can execute automatically when the trigger appears, bypassing the deliberation process that AI systems have learned to hijack. When you have already decided before the stimulus appears exactly how you will respond to outrage bait, the AI loses its leverage. The hook has no fish to catch. Consider this scenario. You open your email and there is a message from someone criticizing your work, sharp, perhaps unfair, designed to provoke a reaction. Without premeditation, your threat system fires instantly, your cortisol spikes, and you are composing an emotional response before your rational mind has even fully engaged. With premeditation, you have already anticipated this possibility. You have already decided, I will read this twice, wait 20 minutes, and respond only to what is factually actionable. The stimulus arrives. Your pre-made decision executes. The manipulation fails. This works with algorithmic content too. Before opening any feed, decide in advance exactly what you are there for, how long you will stay, and what specific trigger will end the session. Write it down if necessary. Tell someone if it helps. Make the intention concrete and external rather than a vague internal hope that dissolves the moment the dopamine loop begins. One powerful technique is what we might call a digital morning brief. 5 minutes before touching your phone, where you clearly articulate to yourself, what do I want to accomplish today? What matters to me? What am I protecting? This brief moment of stoic intentionality creates an anchor, a reference point your rational mind can return to when the algorithmic current tries to pull you sideways. Remember, the stoic warrior does not walk into battle unprepared. And make no mistake, your daily digital environment is a battlefield. The weapons are invisible. The enemy is extraordinarily sophisticated, and the prize is your attention, your time, and ultimately your identity. Prepare accordingly. Principle 5. Master the pause between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, writing from the darkness of a Nazi concentration camp, articulated something that Epictetus had known from the darkness of slavery 2,000 years earlier. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space, that tiny precious gap between what happens and what you do about it, is the most contested real estate in the modern world. Artificial intelligence is in the business of eliminating it. Every design choice in every major digital platform is oriented toward the same goal: reducing the friction between impulse and action to as close to zero as possible. The infinite scroll eliminates the natural stopping point of the page. The autoplay feature removes the moment of decision between videos. The notification sound is engineered to trigger the same neural pathway as a slot machine reward. The like count updates in real time to keep your social monitoring system perpetually engaged. All of it, every single design decision, is aimed at collapsing that space between stimulus and response until your behavior becomes reflexive, automatic, and unchosen. The Stoic response is to widen that space deliberately, not just to create it, but to inhabit it consciously, to furnish it with intention, and to make it the home of your most authentic self. Here is a technique the ancient Stoics practiced that modern neuroscience has fully validated. When you feel the pull of a digital impulse, the urge to check your phone, to refresh your feed, to respond immediately to a notification, take 3 slow, deliberate breaths before acting. This is not relaxation advice. This is neurological strategy. 3 slow breaths activate the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational judgment and long-term thinking, and suppress the amygdala's threat and reward response. In practical terms, you are physically, biochemically shifting your brain from reactive mode to responsive mode, from the part of you that the algorithm can manipulate to the part of you that can choose. 3 breaths. That is the gap. That is where your freedom lives. But the pause is only the beginning. The Stoics also practiced what Marcus Aurelius called hypomnemata, daily written reflections, a kind of internal monitoring system where they would review their thoughts, impulses, and reactions with honest, compassionate scrutiny. Not to judge themselves, but to understand themselves deeply enough to catch their patterns before those patterns caught them. In the digital age, this becomes a practice of what we might call impulse journaling, keeping a brief daily record of your attentional choices. Where did you go online today? What pulled you there? How did you feel before, during, and after? What did you gain? What did you sacrifice? This is not self-punishment. It is self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, deep, honest, unsparing self-knowledge, is the single most effective defense against algorithmic manipulation that exists. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that the platforms do not want you to understand. Their systems work best on people who don't know themselves. The less clarity you have about your own values, moods, triggers, and desires, the more easily their AI can predict your behavior and exploit it. Self-knowledge is not just philosophically valuable. It is strategically essential. Consider the person who knows that they compulsively check social media when they feel anxious. That knowledge alone changes everything. Now the anxiety arrives, and instead of reflexively reaching for the phone, which will increase the anxiety, not relieve it, they can pause, identify the feeling, choose a different response. The trigger is the same. The algorithm's prediction is the same. But the outcome is different, because the human is present in that gap, rather than absent from it. Remember, between stimulus and response is where you live, not in the stimulus which the world controls, not in the response which habit and impulse would determine for you. In the gap, that is your address. That is your sovereignty. Guard it with everything you have. Principle 6. Live with intention in a world designed for distraction. Seneca wrote one of the most devastating sentences in the history of philosophy. He was writing to his friend Lucilius about the passage of time, and he said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it." He then added something that stops the breath when you read it with modern eyes. We are not given a short life, but we make it short, and we are not ill-supplied, but wasteful of it. Seneca died in 65 AD. He never saw a smartphone. He never experienced the notification economy. He never watched a recommendation algorithm calculate the precise video length, thumbnail color, and emotional trigger most likely to capture 3 more minutes of a human being's finite existence. And yet he saw the enemy perfectly. Time is not lost in dramatic, obvious ways. It is lost in 17-minute increments, in absent-minded scrolls, in the compulsive checking of feeds that offer nothing new but promise, always promise, that the next refresh might bring something worth having. The Stoics practiced what they called living according to nature, which did not mean returning to caves and forests, but rather living in alignment with their rational nature, their highest nature, the part of them that could think, create, connect, and contribute to something larger than the next dopamine hit. In the AI age, living according to your nature means actively, deliberately, continuously choosing where your attention goes. Because the default, the path of least resistance, the direction every algorithm is pushing you, is directly away from it. One of the most powerful practical approaches to this is time blocking with Stoic intentionality. Not just scheduling your tasks, you likely already do that, but scheduling your attention states. Decide in advance. From 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., my attention belongs to deep creative work, and nothing digital will interrupt it. From 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., my attention belongs to the people I love, and no notification is more important than their faces. This is not productivity advice. This is a declaration of values expressed through time allocation, because how you spend your attention is, ultimately, how you spend your life. There is no separation. Every hour of fractured, algorithmically hijacked attention is an hour of your singular, irreplaceable life that was given to a machine rather than to your own choosing. Think of it this way. A great sculptor does not pick up any tool that comes to hand. They choose precisely this chisel for this moment, this pressure, this angle. They bring every ounce of their attention to bear on exactly the right point, and through that focused intention, something of lasting beauty emerges from raw stone. Your life is the stone. Your attention is the chisel. Every moment of true focus creates something that distraction never can, and every moment surrendered to an algorithm is a moment that cannot be reclaimed. Living intentionally in the digital age also means doing something the Stoics valued enormously, cultivating odium, sacred leisure. Not the vacant consumption of entertainment, but the active, nourishing rest of a mind given space to wander, reflect, and replenish. Reading without a purpose, walking without a destination, sitting in silence without filling it. These are not luxuries. They are the soil in which deep attention grows. Research from MIT's neuroscience labs confirms what the Stoics knew intuitively. The brain's default mode network, active during unfocused rest, is responsible for creativity, insight, emotional integration, and the formation of long-term memory. When you eliminate every moment of idle mental space with digital stimulation, you do not just lose those minutes. You lose the mental processes that could only happen in them. Remember, living with intention is not about doing more. It is about doing what matters, fully, with your whole mind present. In a world engineered to fragment your focus into 1,000 useless pieces, the radical act is wholeness. Principle 7. Practice voluntary discomfort to build attentional strength. Here is something the Stoics did that seems almost eccentric until you understand the purpose. They voluntarily made themselves uncomfortable. Cato, one of the most admired Stoics of his era, would walk barefoot through Rome in the heat of summer. Seneca would periodically eat only the simplest food and wear the roughest clothes. Not because he was poor, but because he wanted to know with certainty that he could endure hardship if it came. Marcus Aurelius woke before dawn despite being the most powerful man on earth, because discipline over comfort was a value he actively maintained. This was not masochism. It was training. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology has confirmed through decades of research. The capacity to tolerate discomfort is the foundation of every other form of self-mastery. You cannot maintain focus if you are addicted to immediate relief. You cannot build anything of lasting value if you flee every moment of friction. You cannot resist algorithmic manipulation if your nervous system has been trained to demand instant gratification. And here is the uncomfortable truth of the attention economy. Every time you reach for your phone because you feel a moment of boredom, restlessness, or low-level anxiety, you are training your brain that discomfort must be immediately resolved with stimulation. You are strengthening the exact neural pathway that the algorithm depends on. You are, with each reflexive reach, making yourself easier to manipulate. The Stoic practice for the digital age is what we might call intentional boredom, deliberately sitting with the discomfort of unoccupied moments rather than filling them automatically. Waiting in a queue without your phone, sitting in silence for 10 minutes before sleeping, allowing a conversation to have pauses without filling them with a screen. These are small acts. Their effect is enormous. Each time you sit with discomfort rather than fleeing it, you are building what neuroscientists call distress tolerance and what the Stoics called inner strength. You are teaching your nervous system that the uncomfortable feeling of unoccupied attention is not an emergency. It is not a problem to be solved. It is simply a feeling, impermanent, harmless, and entirely survivable. And as your tolerance for discomfort grows, something remarkable happens. The algorithm's power over you diminishes in direct proportion, because its entire leverage depends on your brain treating low-level discomfort as a crisis that must be immediately resolved with the dopamine hit of a notification, a like, a new piece of content. Remove that crisis response. The leverage disappears. Think of it like this. A muscle that has never been challenged has no strength to offer when the load arrives. An attention span that has never been trained to hold a difficult, unrewarding silence has no endurance when deep work demands it. The Stoics built their inner strength through voluntary friction. We must build our attentional strength the same way, deliberately, consistently, with the understanding that every moment of chosen discomfort is a deposit in an account that pays dividends in focus, clarity, and freedom. One practical exercise is what we might call the 60-second rule. Once a day, when you feel the impulse to reach for your phone, set a timer for 60 seconds and simply sit with the impulse without acting on it. Observe it. Notice how it rises and peaks and begins to subside exactly like a wave. You do not have to fight it. You simply have to outlast it. 60 seconds. Over days and weeks, extend that window. The impulse does not get stronger. You get stronger. Remember, the Stoics did not pursue comfort. They pursued character. And character, in any age, is built through chosen resistance, through deciding again and again that your values matter more than your impulses. Principle 8. Choose your chances carefully. As your actions, Marcus Aurelius wrote, the things you think about determine the quality of your mind. 5 words deserve to be read again slowly. The things you think about, not the things you do, not the things you say. The things you think about, the content that occupies your mental space, the ideas you turn over, the narratives you expose yourself to, the images that your mind replays in quiet moments. These determine the quality of your mind. And here is what the AI-driven attention economy has done to the inputs. Most people are feeding their minds. The content that receives maximum algorithmic amplification is not the content that is most true, most wise, most nourishing, or most conducive to human flourishing. It is the content that is most emotionally activating. Outrage, fear, contempt, tribal conflict, grievance, scandal. These emotions drive engagement. Engagement drives revenue. Revenue drives the algorithm to serve more of the same. The average person in 2025 is consuming, passively and largely unconsciously, an enormous daily dose of content specifically selected by an artificial intelligence for its ability to trigger negative emotional states, and then wondering why they feel anxious, angry, exhausted, and vaguely hopeless by evening. The Stoics were extraordinarily deliberate about their mental diet. Seneca spent hours daily with the works of philosophers he admired, not for entertainment, but for what he called the nourishment of the soul. Marcus Aurelius returned again and again to a small number of foundational ideas, deepening his understanding of them rather than consuming an ever wider range of shallow impressions. Epictetus taught his students to be more selective about what they allowed into their minds than about what they allowed into their mouths, because what enters the mind shapes the mind. This is not metaphor, it is neuroscience. The neural pathways you strengthen through repeated activation become your default modes of perception. Feed your mind a daily diet of conflict and grievance, and conflict and grievance become the lens through which you see everything. Feed it wisdom, beauty, and depth, and those become your defaults instead. 1. Profoundly practical approach to this is what we might call the Stoic content audit. For 1 week at the end of each day, ask yourself 3 questions about the content you consumed. First, did this make me wiser? Second, did this make me kinder? Third, did this make me more capable of living according to my values? If the honest answer to all 3 is no, if the content left you more anxious, more irritated, more distracted, more dissatisfied, then it was not neutral. It was actively harmful. And you get to choose whether to continue allowing it access to your mind. This is not about creating an information bubble or avoiding difficult truths. It is about the difference between choosing what you engage with, based on your own clear values, versus having your mental diet determined by an AI optimizing for your emotional volatility. The Stoics also taught something radical about social inputs. The people you spend time with shape you as powerfully as the ideas you consume. Tell me who you spend time with, Seneca wrote, and I will tell you who you are. In the digital age, this extends to the accounts you follow, the communities you participate in, the conversations you allow to occupy your mental bandwidth. They are forming you. Choose them accordingly. Remember, you are what you repeatedly think. And in the age of AI curation, what you repeatedly think is increasingly determined not by your choices but by a machine's calculation. Reclaim the curation. Your mind deserves a diet chosen by you for your growth, not by an algorithm for its profit. Principle 9. Embrace solitude as the sanko in power. There is a moment that many people in the modern world have never experienced. The moment of genuine uninterrupted solitude, with no device, no content, no ambient noise, no external stimulus of any kind. When the mind, left entirely to itself, begins to generate its own depth. The Stoics sought this moment daily. They considered it essential, not optional, not occasional, but as necessary as food and sleep. Solitude was where self-knowledge deepened, where wisdom was distilled from experience, where the identity was clarified and the values were reaffirmed, where, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, you retreat into yourself as much as you like. The attention economy's greatest achievement has been the near total elimination of this moment from modern life. Think about the last time you were alone with your thoughts, genuinely alone, without any digital input, for more than 5 minutes. Not in meditation with a guided audio track, not exercising with a podcast, not commuting with music, simply alone, in silence with your own mind. For many people, that experience has become deeply uncomfortable, and that discomfort is not accidental. A person comfortable in their own silence is a person with a rich inner life, a person who does not need external stimulation to feel whole. And a person who does not need external stimulation to feel whole is extraordinarily difficult to manipulate with external stimulation. The platforms need you to be afraid of silence. They need the unoccupied moment to feel like a problem. Because the moment you are content in your own company, the moment solitude becomes a pleasure rather than a void, their most powerful weapon becomes powerless. The Stoic practice of solitude in the digital age begins with something deceptively simple. Create one daily window, even 10 minutes, of what we might call radical unconnection. No phone, no music, no podcast, no screen, just you, your breath, and the full weight of your own consciousness. At first, this will feel uncomfortable. Your mind will protest loudly, reaching for the familiar comfort of stimulation. This discomfort is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that the rehabilitation of your attention is working. Like a muscle returning to use after injury, it will ache before it strengthens. Within days, something will shift. The silence will become less threatening. Within weeks, it will become spacious. Within months, it will become the most productive, nourishing, creatively fertile state you have access to, because it is the only state in which your deepest mind can actually speak. It is in solitude that the Stoics did their most important work. Not in the agora, not in the lecture hall, but in the quiet hours of early morning or late evening, when the world was still and the inner voice could finally be heard above the noise. That voice is still there. It has not left you. It has simply been drowned out. The solitude is not empty. It is full of everything that the noise has been drowning. Your actual thoughts, your genuine feelings, your real values, your authentic desires. The ideas that could only arrive in stillness. The connections that could only form without interruption. The clarity that has been waiting patiently behind every distraction you have ever chosen over it. Remember, the most powerful version of you does not live in the feed. It lives in the silence, and it is waiting. Principle 10. Live as if every moment of attention is a choice. We arrive at the final principle. And it is perhaps the most confronting of all. Epictetus said, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. In other words, identity before action. Know who you are choosing to be, and then let every choice, including every attentional choice, flow from that knowledge. Here is the deepest truth about the attention economy that most people never reach. The battle for your attention is not really about your attention. It is about your identity. Because where attention goes, meaning follows. And where meaning accumulates, identity forms. Spend enough hours consuming outrage and you become someone oriented toward conflict. Spend enough hours consuming comparison content and you become someone defined by inadequacy. Spend enough hours in the infinite scroll of other people's curated lives, and you become someone who experiences their own life as fundamentally insufficient. This is not dramatic. It is gradual. It is the slow, daily, barely perceptible drift of a person away from themselves, away from their values, their depth, their genuine desires, their authentic identity, toward a manufactured version of a person that is easier to monetize. The Stoics understood that identity was not something you discovered. It was something you chose and then continuously, actively reaffirmed through your choices. Every morning Marcus Aurelius chose, again, to be a philosopher-emperor rather than merely an emperor. Every day Epictetus chose again to be a free man in his mind despite the chains on his body. Every moment of directed attention is a vote for who you are becoming. When you choose to close the feed and open a book, that is a vote. When you choose to sit in silence rather than reach for stimulation, that is a vote. When you choose to give your full, undivided, unhurried attention to a person you love, rather than monitoring your phone, that is a vote. When you choose to spend 2 hours in deep work on something that matters rather than 2 hours in the shallow consumption of things that don't, that is a vote. These votes accumulate. They compound. Over days and weeks and months, they build a person, the person you are consciously choosing to be, rather than the person the algorithm is quietly shaping without your awareness or consent. This is not about perfection. The Stoics were not perfect. Marcus Aurelius, whose journals are a masterpiece of self-awareness and aspiration, frequently records his own failures to live up to his ideals. The practice is not perfection. The practice is the returning, the noticing, the choosing again, the continuous reaffirmation of who you intend to be. And in the AI age, that returning is more necessary, more urgent, and more revolutionary than it has ever been. Because the forces pulling you away from yourself have never been more sophisticated, more personalized, or more relentless. But neither has the ancient wisdom available to resist them. 25 centuries of Stoic insight, forged in slavery, refined in exile, tested in the chaos of empire, deepened through plague and war, and the full catastrophe of human experience exists. Precisely for this. For the moment when a person looks up from the scroll, feels the hollow aftermath of hours surrendered to a machine, and decides, not anymore. My attention is mine. My identity is mine. My time is mine. And I am choosing differently now. As we close this journey through these principles, carry this single truth with you. The AI systems competing for your attention are not evil. They are indifferent. They optimize for what they are designed to optimize for, with stunning precision and zero regard for your flourishing. But you are not indifferent. You are not a system. You are a human being with the extraordinary, irreplaceable capacity for rational choice, what the Stoics considered the most godlike quality in human nature. The capacity to pause, reflect, choose, and act in alignment with your deepest values rather than your most immediate impulses. No algorithm, however sophisticated, can take that from you. It can only make you forget it is there. These 10 principles are not a cure for the digital age. They are a remembering, a return to something ancient and true about who you are and what you are capable of. Something that was known long before the first server farm was built, and that will remain true long after the last one goes dark. Your attention is not a resource to be harvested. It is the medium through which you experience your life. Protect it accordingly. Direct it deliberately. And remember, what you attend to, you become. Choose wisely. Thank you for spending this time here, with ideas that I hope will serve you long after this video ends. If this resonated with something real in you, subscribe and share it with someone who is ready to hear it. The next video is already waiting, and what it reveals about the Stoic approach to modern life will take everything we explored today one level deeper. Stay present, stay sovereign, stay free.